Good evening and welcome to this Tuesday, September 1st, 2020 meeting of the Raymore Planning and Zoning Commission. Please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Let me remind commissioners, please make sure your microphone is lighted green when you're speaking and speak into the microphone for the record. And we'll call roll. Commissioner Wiggins.
Present.
Commissioner Bowie.
Present.
Commissioner Ackland.
Present.
Commissioner Fizer.
Present.
Commissioner Peterman.
Present.
Commissioner Urquia.
Present.
Commissioner Manser.
Present.
And Mayor Turnbow.
Present.
And Commissioner Faulkner is present. We do have a quorum. And we have no appearances, no personal appearances scheduled this evening. One item this evening under consent agenda, approval of minutes from our August 18th, 2020 meeting. And unless any of the commissioners have concerns about the minutes, I would entertain a motion either to accept consent agenda or to approve minutes from our August 18th, 2020 meeting.
I'll make a motion to approve the consent agenda.
Second.
Motion by Commissioner Urquia, second by Commissioner Wiggins to accept consent agenda. All those in favor, raise a hand, please. 9, and we have 9 in favor, none opposed, and no abstentions. Moving along, nothing this evening under unfinished business, and we'll move into new business. Our first case under new business this evening is case number 20014. The fiscal year 2021 through 2025 capital improvement program. At this time, I'd like to open the public hearing on this case, and I will turn the floor over to Mr. Icky for the presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the Planning and Zoning Commission. Before you tonight for consideration is the fiscal year 2021-2025 capital improvement plan. Through my presentation tonight, what I plan to focus on, though, is really the projects that are going to be impacting the fiscal year 2021 budget only. And so while I'm certainly happy to answer questions about any of the future plan projects, much of what I'm going to talk about tonight will be really just looking at the next fiscal year and what we'll be seeing coming up here immediately. I want to start tonight by not only thanking the Commission for allowing me to make the presentation, but also thanking all of the members of the Capital Improvement Committee. This committee has been invaluable in putting together the projects that you'll be looking at tonight and we'll be discussing, and also providing the vetting, the advice, the background information and details that is necessary to put together a solid proposal that not only allows us to push forward the plans that we have established, but also support the strategic goal and other items that we as a city are following to move the entire community forward. So I really would like to take a second to thank City Planner Katie Jardu, Economic Development Director David Gress, Accountant Alexa Williams, Finance Director Elisa Williams, Parks and Recreation Director Nathan Mustine, Integrated Technology Systems Director Jim Mayberry, Public Works Director Mike Crass, and Assistant to the City Manager and Development Services Director Jim Cataret. These folks make up the CIP committee that recommend the projects to our City Manager Jim Fearborn, that then goes before the City Council as well as the Planning and Zoning Commission tonight. The proposed 2021 capital budget includes projects funding of roughly $3.1 million for 20 projects across the different funds. Not included in tonight's presentation and associated with the successful August 4, 2021 no tax increase bond issue are several other projects that are scheduled also for 2021. These are tentatively proposed, there are tentatively proposed 4 projects that'll be completed prior to the end of the fiscal year and are roughly $6.7 million in construction projects and an additional $1 million in design. We will be including these in the budget as adopted by the council, but for tonight, we're going to be separating the GEO bond projects that will be coming separately to just the CIP projects. And so for FY21, what Planning and Zoning will be looking at tonight is a total of roughly $3.1 million in projects throughout the different funds. One of the funds, or one of the several of the projects that I want to highlight, and it crosses several funds. What is really great about this CIP, and especially this year's CIP, is its focus on maintenance, especially maintenance of our curbs, thoroughfares, and the street pres programs. There are several other maintenance programs that we'll also talk about, but I think it's important to note that we have invested roughly $1.6 million in the upkeep of our streets and major infrastructure. This is our annual curb replacement project at around $600,000, the annual street preservation project at $800,000, and the maintenance of thoroughfares at roughly $200,000. We also include a sanitary sewer inflow and infiltration project at roughly $132,000, as well as a fire hydrant replacement project at $146,000. New this year, and what you'll notice in our transportation fund is a new project of the roadside trail maintenance project of $25,000, and we'll talk a little bit in detail, that being a new project. But I wanted to highlight these maintenance projects as these are critical for maintaining the foundation of not just the transportation, but also the stormwater infrastructure that is critical throughout the community. In total, between the $3.1 million in CIP and the $7.7 million in GEO bond projects, we are looking at a total investment in our community in the next fiscal year of roughly $10.8 million. And these are projects that have been approved by our residents through the GEO bond project, as well as through the committee and also the council, or future approval by the council. I'd like to start tonight with the Building and Equipment Replacement Program. This will be one of our smallest projects, though critical. This is a Public Works door access system. This is a $20,000 project, and the project involves the installation of equipment needed to add the remaining exterior doors at the Public Works facility to our electronic door system. Any building that you enter, whether here at City Hall or at Centerview, staff uses an electronic key card in order to enter. The front entrance to the Public Works facility uses a similar key card, but there are other doorways at the rear of the building that access the garage, some of the outbuildings kind of in the back Public Works yard. Those doors currently are just a key and lock. In order to enhance security and also to provide for ease of access for the different Public Works crew members that use those doors, we'll be installing the RFID card system to those facilities. Moving to the Transportation Fund, you'll notice we have the part of the 2021 curb replacement, as well as the 2021 street preservation, as well as the right-of-way infrastructure repairs. And if at any point during my presentation there is a question, please feel free to stop me. I know we'll kind of be jumping to each fund here, but I didn't want to necessarily, yes, sir.
Yeah, you mentioned
Commissioner Arkia.
the doors. How much was that going to cost?
$20,000.
$20,000? Okay.
Yep.
Commissioner Wiggins.
If you wouldn't mind, I know since you are jumping around some, if you do have page numbers, you might just specify page 63. That way, as we're flipping through a whole bunch or whatever, if you have that with you, I hate to put you on the spot, but
My page numbers may be slightly different, so I want to make sure I'm on the...
well, yeah, and I should specify, the page from the packet itself. So like transportation starts on what is listed as page 63, at least the bottom of that page. So if you have that, it'd be helpful, because I imagine people are flipping through books or PDFs.
Okay, so if the Building and Equipment Fund started on 63,
I'm sorry, transportation is listed, since you already did building equipment and you mentioned transportation on the...
and I apologize, I only have the page numbers that are part of the overall budget, so I'm looking at page 283 on mine.
Of course.
But I can absolutely, like I said, slow down and make sure that we get to each of the, everyone is on the same page.
Thank you.
So as I said, under the Transportation Fund, we have our important maintenance programs. The two projects, though, that I think are important to highlight are the Falcon and Condor cul-de-sacs. This project will provide space for vehicles to turn around at the end of Falcon and Condor streets. Currently, the two streets terminate with no space for vehicles to turn around. This is not only going to be an ease of use for the residents that live along these roadways, but also will assist in snow plow and other street operations that are critical for these areas, as well as trash collection, rather than having a vehicle come to the terminus of that street and then have to reverse or commit to a K-turn. They're simply able to use the new cul-de-sacs that we are proposing.
Okay, and I did have a question about that item, if you don't mind. So I know that as long as I can remember, Falcon and Condor have dead-ended there at the north. However, there is what appears to be undeveloped land between those current dead ends and Lucy Webb. And so my question may not be just for you, it might be for Mr. Cataret and Ms. Jardot, but how do we know that that area to the north will not develop in the near future and the roads go on through?
The type of cul-de-sacs that we'll be building will be using the existing right-of-way, I believe, and these will be temporary. And so the cul-de-sacs won't be built with the full curb. Rather will be the asphalt overlay that would allow for the trucks to
Right.
turn,
Okay.
so that if anything does develop in that land, those could easily be removed and the full street section could be built.
Okay, thank you. You had me at temporary.
Okay. The second project to highlight in here is the roadside trail maintenance program, as I had mentioned. This project will provide funds for spot maintenance of roadside trails, such as the patching and crack sealing. Many of the roadside trails are over 10 years old and are exhibiting numerous defects and thermal cracks and settlements, which could lead to hazardous conditions. These will be some of the roadside trails, I believe, that you see along Dean, as well as some of the other collector roads that just need a little bit of maintenance as we move forward. So I'll be moving on to the excise tax fund. As several of the other projects, or several of the other funds, don't have projects within them, so we'll be skipping over some of those. And the only highlight out of the excise tax fund is the maintenance of thoroughfare routes, where we'll be investing $200,000 for the maintenance of those roadways. And then moving to the capital improvement fund, this is where we see a few additional projects across the city. The first one being the Hawk Ridge Park additional security cameras for $10,000. And this project involves the installation of additional security camera at the pavilion and amphitheater of Hawk Ridge Park. As soon as we opened this park, it became quickly a popular destination for folks, and I think even in spite of the pandemic, as folks were trying to get out and walk the trails, this would have been a popular park. With that traffic, we also need the additional security measures of a security camera. The current one that is installed looks over the parking lot and has a 180-degree view toward the parking lot and toward the fishing dock. Unfortunately, we also need to be able to have a view on the other side of the pavilion, as well as the second camera would be able to zoom in as far away as the amphitheater itself, providing, again, just more security and more coverage in that park. Second project to highlight is 2 streetlights at 163rd Street and Fox Ridge Drive for $50,000. This project will install 2 streetlights at 163rd Street near the intersection of 163rd and Fox Ridge Drive. The next project is the Sidewalk Gap Program, which I believe the Planning and Zoning Commission is familiar with. This project involves the installation of sidewalks to fill gaps in the existing sidewalk network. Current connections that will be made with this project will be from Fox Ridge Drive from Fox Ridge East to Old Mill Road. Another one will be along Prairie Lane from Knoll Creek Lane to Halls Creek, and while the idea of the sidewalk along Prairie Lane will actually close a loop within that neighborhood, that'll kind of connect the 2 north and south streets of that entire neighborhood out there. Johnston Drive between Darrowby and Dean, and then North Adams Street from 58 Highway North to the north property line of the 208 West Walnut.
And Mr. Eke, can you talk for just a minute about why the city will be funding those as opposed to the cost going to the lot owners where those sidewalks don't exist?
In some of these cases, these were areas, specifically the Prairie Lane between Knoll Creek and Halls Creek was a good example. It is an area where it wasn't necessarily required by the developer to put a sidewalk along Prairie Lane. But now with the remainder of that neighborhood being built out, it's a natural connection point between these two roads along Prairie Lane to have it to have that sidewalk to increase walkability, but also again just to provide another connection between the two roadways.
Thank you.
And then the last project within this fund is the baseball concession door replacement for $6,000. I'm sorry. The doors and frames of the buildings are worn out and difficult to lock, and the frames are rusted and need replaced. This will also include a new electronic door access system, much like what is being installed at Public Works. Replacing the doors prior to these there is already a project to install the electronic door key system, but the new doors are necessary because of the age and just how weathered these doors have been. It is best to have a solid locking door with that electronic key card system installed as well.
Are you guys soliciting that? Are you guys soliciting those two projects together or something?
The RFID key card project has been part of a previous capital project, yes, and has been bid. The new doors themselves, part of what happened was as part of that process, when they were looking at it, they had mentioned that the doors had been deteriorated so much that, placing the key cards on there really wouldn't improve safety as much until we had the fully locking and doorways.
Yeah, okay.
And that was Commissioner Bowie for the record.
Sorry.
That's okay. All right, thank you.
Okay, moving on to the Stormwater Sales Tax Fund. This is the other half of the 2021 Annual Curb Replacement Program. The other project to highlight is the Silver Lake Circle Groundwater Diversion for $125,000. This project involves the installation of a pipe along Silver Lake Circle to collect sump pump discharges. Several homes in the vicinity of the Silver Lake Circle Lancaster intersection have sump pumps that discharge year-round. This has caused a significant icing problem in the winter and has severely damaged the pavement at that intersection. If you've had an opportunity to drive in that area, it's pretty clear that the water flows pretty continuously down this street. Not only does it create an icing issue, but in fall, as the leaves collect along the roadway there, the water continues to pump and just creates kind of a slick, muddy mess. So this will not only clean up the street, but will also provide for a better infrastructure in the ground for all the homes along that roadway.
And again, Mr. Ake, thank you. I don't have any concerns about the concept here at all, but I did get kind of perplexed. The map that I was using does not have an intersection between Silver Lake Circle and Lancaster. And so I was a little bit puzzled. There's also a Silver Lake Drive, and I don't know, it wasn't actually a city map, it was probably a Google map, but this would be, Mr. Crass, you may know this one, would this be at the north termination of Lancaster, north termination, and my map thought that was Silver Lake Drive where it terminates, and also the spelling of Lancaster had a D in it, Landcaster.
That is correct, Mr. Chairman. We will get that corrected. Thank you.
Both items
are correct, yes, sir.
Okay, thanks. Sorry, Mr. Ake.
Always good to catch these now.
Well, I figured better here than sending it on to City Council.
So if there are no other questions on that fund, we'll move on to the Park Sales Tax Fund. The two major projects here are the TB Hanna Station site work for $225,000. This project will finalize the improvements at TB Hanna Station. Additional projects such as the expanded ice rink at the depot and improvements to the general grading, landscaping, and site work associated with the all-inclusive spray ground and playground are also included. The second project to highlight is the Hawks Nest Playground. It's at $150,000. This is a project that commits the $150,000 in matching funds as part of a Land Water Conservation Fund grant through the National Park Service. The grant would help fund a major portion of the inclusive playground plan for Hawk Ridge Park. We're currently in that application process, waiting to hear back from the grant coordinators, but we did need to put the matching, or at least make a commitment to that matching of $150,000, and this seemed the ideal place. Any questions on the park fund?
Yeah, Commissioner Akia here. If we
Commissioner Kia.
don't get the grant, what would be the plan for those funds?
They could be,
Or the park and the funds in general?
They would, so we would continue, for the park itself, we would continue to fundraise and continue to apply for this grant as it is an annual grant. So really, there's two things we could do. We could either present to the council to release those funds to go directly to the park, or we could continue to keep those funds in the capital improvement plan as a commitment for the following year's grant that we would also continue to apply for. Okay, if there are no further questions, I'll move on to the Enterprise Capital Maintenance Fund. And there are several projects in here that are related. As I had mentioned earlier, the inflow and infiltration reduction, as well as the hydrant replacement project. These are two maintenance programs that continue to be critical, not only for the safety, but also health in our community. The other projects, and I may lean on Mr. Crass behind me a little bit, these are a number of projects that go to an improvement as well as maintenance needs at the Owen Good lift station. The first project to highlight is the Owen Good force main condition analysis. This inspection provides a condition analysis of the Owen Good force main from the pump station at 195th Street to the point where the flow transitions from pressure to gravity flow at the Mazuma Credit Union. This type of inspection was last performed in 2011, and at that time a number of areas showed signs of diminished pipe wall thickness, which over time could lead to leaks in the pipes. The study will help identify if the condition of the main has remained stable or if there are areas where repairs or replacements are needed. And so this really is a preventative maintenance item that helps us get ahead of any major issues that may come down the pipe, no pun intended, from this force main. Second item to highlight is the Owen Good lift station overall improvements. The project involves removing sediment from the wet well at the Owen Good lift station and the installation of a mixer to keep sediment in suspension rather than settling in the wet well. Also provides a pump repair kit. Over time, sediment has accumulated in the bottom of the wet well, which has reduced the space between the bottom of the well and the pumps themselves. When the pumps are operated at higher speeds, the lack of space leads to turbulence in the wet well, which leads to premature failure of the pump impellers. It's a lot of technical information, and if you have any other questions, I can easily hand this off to Mr. Crass, but in short, it is a necessary improvement in order to not only keep up with the growth of the community, but also to ensure that the lift station itself continues to work even at high capacity times. The next two items really address the security and just the fortification of the lift station itself. Even though it is rather isolated and by itself, from time to time there are individuals who may wander into the area, and so this is an improvement. The Owen Good access and security camera system for $30,000 involves the installation of equipment needed to add 2 buildings to the door access system and the addition of a security camera at the Owen Good lift station. Issues with the access of the Owen Good and addresses issues with access to the Owen Good facility. The current keyed system does not allow for known access, plus there is currently no security cameras at the facility. The items would supply information and access to the facility in real time and recorded data. So on top of the security camera, we'd also be adding, I believe, another internet connection. That security camera would continue to be monitored like all here at City Hall and other facilities in our dispatch center with the police department. And then finally, the last project, the Owen Goods Security Gates. This project involves the installation of equipment needed to add to the existing security gate and to the door access control system. Essentially, we'd be increasing the kind of durability of the chain link gate that is there now, provide a stronger locking mechanism, and then using the IT connection from the security camera, we would also be able to add it to our door access system. And so only approved personnel with the RFID card would be able to access that gate, then again also access the building itself and the lift station. And so this is a really important security improvement for the system itself. That really completes the projects and the highlights themselves. If you have any questions, certainly am here to answer as many as I can, as well as the other staff members that are here that helped put together these projects. And so I want to thank the Planning Commission for their time and stand open for any questions.
Right. Thank you, Mr. Icky. Commissioners, do you have any questions at this time? I'll ask two. They're very brief, and they're actually out past fiscal '21. So if you don't mind, I tended to look at the document as a whole. In mine, this would be Recreation Park. The title is Recreation Park Picnic Pavilion. It's actually not planned until fiscal '25. And my question is simply that the title says Picnic Pavilion. The narrative description below says this playground is a new addition to Rec Park, and the photo appears to be a playground. So I'm having a little trouble reconciling picnic pavilion versus playground. I can give you the project number if that helps you find it.
That's what I thought. This project specifically, this was part of the project that helped tear down part of the park house. And the plan was that there would be, on the foundation of the former park house would be a pavilion picnic structure, much like what we have at Hawk Ridge, but then also a smaller playground that would accompany it.
So it's really both.
Correct.
Okay, so I can certainly live with the title. It just had me a little bit confused. The other question is in my material, it's actually on page 89. This is an overall summary, projects by category and department, and there's nothing specific on that page that you'd really have to see, but it lists several projects: the Good Ranch sanitary sewer extensions, which is funded in out years, planned to be funded in out years. Also, the Dean Avenue Road extension to the south of Cass Parkway, Hubuck Hill Road. And the question I had on those was simply kind of like my sidewalk question earlier. It's, can you explain a little further why city is planning to fund those rather than requiring that as part of development of that area?
With these being unfunded projects at this time, I don't believe there is necessarily a plan to fund them. If I'm looking at this correctly, as they're moving out to those, and I want to make sure I'm looking at the right page, but rather they assist as we are looking to set our long-term goals and plans, knowing that there will be growth in those areas, that there will be future development, that we want to make sure that if the time comes that the city may need to be the one that pushes the ball down the road, that we are at least planning for the eventuality of those future projects, but knowing that there will be a developer or a project or something that would actually end up taking these items. We developed the master plan, the roads master plan, I think is a good example where we know for the most part the developers are going to be building roads for their developments, for their projects, but we still went before the voters for a number of road projects, knowing that they were needed, they were necessary, either from a safety standpoint or simply because we wanted to kind of push growth along in those areas, and it matched up with our master plan. And so that's where a lot of these projects come from, and in those out years or those unfunded projects is they match up and mirror what we already have in our plans, and we want to make sure that as developers come on board or as private investment comes in, that they're also going to match and know what we already have planned going forward.
Okay, so it's an identified need, but the funding source and the details really remain to be worked out in future years.
Yeah, and it gives us a good bookmark to know what those projects may cost, because kind of what's going on in the background behind the paper here is, we have a whole database of projects that we add multipliers and, the increased interest of what it might cost. So we may factor a project in 5 years ago, but we at least now have a running total of what it might cost over the years when we may get to it in the future.
Good, great answer, thank you. Any other commissioners have questions for Mr. Akey? Commissioner Urquia?
Just, if my memory serves me correctly, last year when we were looking at this into the future under Parks and Rec, I remember soccer fields being in the future horizon, and now I no longer see soccer fields on the future horizon or any type of improvement to the soccer fields. I was wondering if you knew why that disappeared and why there's zero plans for soccer in Raymore.
The individual project that, if I remember correctly from last year, it was the construction of a fairly large and significant soccer complex. One of the challenges that we realized was that was sort of putting the cart before the horse. We didn't have the land secured or identified necessarily for where a complex of that size would go. And so it really was better to remove that from the out years so that we could kind of sharpen our pencils and go back and make sure that we put the right plan together for hopeful and possible future land that would be identified for a project like that.
Okay. Other questions? Commissioner Mansur?
I had a quick question, and I know that you're not covering the things past fiscal year 2021, but as I'm looking at the dog park, which is planned for fiscal year 23, at the bottom part of that page, on page 24 in my material, it has the budget impact of the additional staffing and maintenance costs of $6,300 per fiscal year. And it has that beginning in fiscal year 21, showing it in 21 and 22 prior to the construction of the dog park in 23. Is there a reason for that?
So if I just want to make sure I understand, why do we have that ongoing cost in fiscal year 21, 22 before? I believe that just may be an error. As that project has moved back in the timeline, those items just needed to be removed, and we can.
Okay, thank you.
Great question.
Brief one right here.
Yeah, Commissioner Bowie.
You guys stated, and I think I read somewhere in the package, and I can't find it now, that the figures are kind of conservative, given the pandemic and so forth. Was there anything else you want to add about that, and it's still pretty much the case at this point?
We kept our revenue projections very conservative, and for the most part, we are looking at, and I want to make sure I have the right line. So within those funds, similar to what we did in the general fund, we are not estimating any loss or increase of business receipts. So in order to estimate those revenues for these funds going forward, we look strictly at what we anticipate the sales tax to be based on the receipts that we received the previous year. Because of the pandemic, we are keeping that relatively flat. And so that really is how we move forward with that. One change that to the revenues that the Planning and Zoning Commission will see and Council will eventually see as well, or sees currently and will be considering, is There was a proposed reallocation of the discretionary 20% between the park sales tax and the stormwater sales tax. And so for FY21, it's proposed to allocate the discretionary 20% at 15% to the park sales tax fund, resulting in a total of 55% being allocated to the park sales tax fund and 5% being allocated to the stormwater sales tax fund, resulting in a 45% being allocated to that stormwater sales tax fund. In past years, and this truly is because of the pandemic, in that the Parks Department saw such an incredible amount of change with programs being canceled, but still needing staffing for maintenance and and several other items. But because of the pandemic, it was important that we make that small adjustment, that we direct a little bit more to the park sales tax fund for some of the maintenance projects and necessary items. And so that is really the only change you see on the revenues for this year.
Cool. Okay, thank you.
Other questions for Mr. Hickey? All right, moving along, the public hearing on this case was already opened. At this point, I'll invite anyone from the public that wishes to speak on this case to come forward to the podium. Please give us your name and address for the record, and we'd request that you keep your comments to 5 minutes or less. And seeing no one from the public, I'll close the public hearing and open the floor for any further discussion by the commission. One thing, Mr. Zur, would you like to give us any advice on what might constitute a proper motion to convey this document on to City Council?
I think what you're looking for, Chairman, is the potential for accepting the capital improvement program presentation as provided by Mr. Icky and forwarding the same back to the council for final acceptance as part of the annual budget.
With the few minor changes as noted?
Yes, Commissioner, or Chairman.
Okay. Discussion, further discussion by the commission?
I'll make a motion. If
Commissioner
that's okay
Kia.
with you? Yeah, I'd like to make a motion to forward the capital improvement plan for fiscal year beginning November 1st, 2020 to City Council for, as presented by Mr. Akey with the minor changes discussed to City Council for approval.
Okay, I think Mr. Zur, what I don't know if I heard was with a recommendation.
Yep. I think you're looking for an acceptance and approval and then forwarding it along to the council with that recommendation of acceptance and approval
Okay.
for.
So Commissioner Kia, if you wouldn't mind, would you tell me the motion again?
So I need to throw in recommendation before approval.
I believe you're accepting the presentation of the capital improvement program as presented by Mr. Icky this evening, and recommending it's be forwarded to the City Council for that approval.
Okay. So I would like to make a motion to accept the presentation by Mr. Akey this evening with the minor changes noted, and recommend that we forward it to the City Council for approval.
That sound good? Okay, thanks.
You're welcome.
I'll second it.
And a second by Commissioner Bowie. Is there any further discussion on the motion? All right, so motion on the floor by Commissioner Urquia, second by Commissioner Bowie. Now it's my turn to stumble on this. To accept tonight's presentation on the fiscal 2021 through 2025 capital improvement program and forward to City Council with minor changes as noted and a recommendation of approval. Sound right? Close?
You paraphrased me very well. Very well.
Thank you. It wasn't that easy. All right. All those in favor, raise a hand, please. 8, 9. I have 9 in favor, none opposed, and no abstentions. Mr. Icky, thank you very much. You're more than welcome to stay for the remainder of the evening, but we appreciate the presentation.
Thank you
and
very much.
your patience with our questions. Thank you. All right, moving along, our next case this evening is case 20012, the 32nd Amendment to the Unified Development Code, small wireless facilities, and this case also will require a public hearing, so I will open the public hearing on case 20012 at this time and request staff, Ms. Jardot, Mr. Cataret, to present the case to the commission.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The 32nd Amendment to the EDC that's before you this evening is to establish the standards for installation of small wireless facilities within both the city public right-of-way as well as upon certain private properties. A text amendment does require a public hearing, which was advertised for this evening, entered into the record our growth management plan, the Unified Development Code, the notice of publication in the journal, as well as a staff report submitted to you this evening. Most of us are familiar with the next generation of cellular technology, basically the 5G or 5th generation data networks. This type of system requires a different type of transmission equipment than what we are used to with the very large cellular towers. Basically, this technology does require the equipment to be placed closer together. So the wireless companies have pushed to have the ability to mount their equipment on public infrastructure, light poles, utility poles, certain buildings, et cetera. I did provide, you've probably seen this technology in different areas that you have visited, but I just gave 2 quick photographs in the staff report of what these facilities look like when they're attached to the utility poles. It was back in 2018, the Missouri legislative session, when they adopted the Uniform Small Wireless Facility Deployment Act. This act really, again, allows these facilities to be located throughout city right-of-way, but the act does provide the guidance for city to basically establish some standards for the installation of these poles within our right-of-way. MML followed up after the act was adopted, became law. The Missouri Municipal League, MML, published a model ordinance for communities to utilize. I think the intent there was to try to provide some uniformity throughout the entire state. Though a few communities that have adopted the ordinance already, I have seen, have followed the template. Our proposed amendment follows incorporates the language from that template as well. Technically, under the law, the city does not have to have adopted the ordinance when a carrier comes requesting to install the technology. The law actually gives communities a specific amount of time to then, once an application is received, to adopt an ordinance. Staff simply felt that we wanted to be proactive, have it in place. That way it's very clear what our requirements would be, and there would be no holding up a carrier that wanted to move quickly. We are in accordance with the Act through this amendment, establishing the allowance of small wireless facilities as a permitted use in all of our zoning districts except single-family residential areas. The Act specifically allows communities to not allow the facilities in the right-of-way in our single-family neighborhoods. Alternative methods of deployment of the technology would have to be done within those neighborhoods if they couldn't be served by other facilities that were located outside the single-family area. I note the definitions in the amendment. Those do come directly from the Missouri Act. We do, under this ordinance amendment, it would establish the requirement for a permit to be obtained prior to the installation of small wireless facilities. And we would have, through our policies, we would have different types of permits that could be secured. They actually could get a multiple site permit. They wouldn't necessarily have a permit for each specific pole that they would install the technology upon, but they could group the poles together. I do note there are limitations, of course, to the size of these facilities on the utility poles. Principally, the facility has to be located within an enclosure of no more than 6 cubic feet in volume. There's also limitations on how high the equipment can be. Principally, it cannot be higher than 10 foot above the existing utility pole. If there is they have the ability to install new utility poles on our right-of-way. The one caveat there is that if it happens to be poles that are located in a specific area where we utilize decorative poles, so I gave the example of Municipal Circle has decorative poles. If they wanted to add additional poles, they would have to utilize similar equipment. They couldn't just put up their standard pole amongst all of our decorative poles. So we have that ability to monitor that as well. Really, in Raymore, only the Municipal Circle would fall under that requirement because the original town has single-family zoning within it. So although we have a lot of decorative lights in the original town neighborhood, it is protected by its residential zoning for the most part. But the last note is I know there's some concern about allowing these facilities perhaps within the public right-of-way, but the federal law makes it very clear we cannot ban these services within our jurisdiction. And I think that's why Missouri went forward with the act to make sure that we're going to allow them, but we're going to have certain standards that have to be followed for the deployment of the facilities. Staff did submit findings of fact on this text amendment for your consideration. And again, we prepared this amendment. We wanted to be responsive to the technology, and if we have not been contacted by any companies to install the technology, but if we were, we wanted to be ready for them and to be able to react quickly for their deployment. We think it was prudent to move forward and establish these requirements now before we get an application, so we stand ready to work with those carriers. Staff does recommend the Planning and Zoning Commission accept the findings that we are proposing and forward this 32nd Amendment to the UDC to the City Council with a recommendation of approval. The draft ordinance was obviously included for your consideration. This particular bill, again, has several different sections within it that addresses where these facilities would be located and then the general standards that I, for the most part, outlined in the staff report. So for now, that will conclude staff report.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Mr. Carteret. Commissioner Wiggins.
Thank you. I don't think I saw it. If I did, I overlooked it. Do we have an anticipation? So obviously, we're no longer talking about 150-foot cell towers that can cover the entire city of Raymore. We're talking about tens, dozens, hundreds of these. I mean, should we expect 500 of these things potentially, theoretically, to be popping up? I know they're a little bit larger than footballs, or like some that I've seen before, and based on your pictures. But I mean, are they going to be on every other light pole, or is it going to be one to a neighborhood? And I don't know if anybody would have concern over all of a sudden these wireless transmitters being on every corner kind of thing, or is it just, what do you think, there's going to be 20?
Certainly, the numbers won't be on every light pole, so that's at least one plus.
Yeah.
The ability to co-locate and co-utilize the facilities is an advantage as well. I don't know, Mr. Kraft, do you have any idea about separation of the? And I do not. I don't know.
I know, like driving
100
down
feet, 1,000 feet. I don't know what that separation.
I know driving down like
would be.
Metcalf or like Mission over on the Kansas side, you do see them sporadically, but they're not on every pole. But I just didn't know if you guys had any idea. Like you said, you haven't been contacted by anybody, so obviously you would have no clue what.
Yeah, what a deployment would look like in our city. Certainly, topography and obstructions would come into play as well. But
and then my other question was, and this could be a lack of knowledge when it comes to utility poles and light poles, but the cell towers, that's a single fixture, and they have their own power consumption there that they then pay for. The city of Raymore, we own our street lights and we pay our light bills. Do they pay a licensing fee to the city? Is there a way to individually, trace back how much power consumption one of these uses to turn back to the carriers, or is this just something we end up eating as a city as we anticipate? Let's say there's 200 that are coming increased utility usage.
Certainly, one of the reasons they want to use utility poles is because power is there already for them. But yes, there is when the permit is issued for the initial installation, there is a fee charged for that initial permit. Then there is an annual fee for each pole they have facilities upon. And so that amount covers not only the cost of what the electricity would be, but also just the use of our right-of-ways. So, as far as I mentioned 10 foot on existing poles, if they install new poles, they also are limited to the height of what the other poles would be. So they can't just insert their own pole and suddenly go, 30 feet higher than what our existing pole would be. So we also regulate the height of all of these facilities.
Excellent. Thank you, sir.
Commissioner Kia.
Yeah, I was just curious, as we enact this ordinance and these kind of rules, if a cellular company has come up with call it a newer, different way of installing that may look a little different, are they going to have the opportunity to present the case to amend or change, or are we just going to kind of say this is our way of doing it and comply or no?
Probably, again, I think that's part of the advantage of being the model ordinance, so it's consistent across the state right now. If they come in and have a different technology, a different way of installation, a different need, I think that would be something that wouldn't be unique to Raymore by any stretch. So we would be responsive, we would obviously monitor, and if they came to us and had a request that needed something adjusted in our ordinance, we would certainly look at that. And we're hoping that the way this is written, I don't think is so confining that there's only one way of installing the technology. So hopefully we're flexible enough.
Mr. Zerk.
Yeah, dovetailing with that comment, under your provisions for denial of an application, there's somewhat broad provisions that you've got in there. We cannot terminate or we can't deny it outright or prohibit them, but there is some flexibility in there that we would provide. I would note with Mr. Cataretta as well, because you're utilizing a language that's similar from Missouri Municipal League for all of these, any one interpretation that we get from other cities that might run into trouble with the installation or the application of this provision, we'll be able to learn from that and be responsive to it because it'll be similar language across the state.
Okay, thank you.
Quick question.
Yeah, Commissioner Bowie.
Where are we at in terms of, just curious about, you said we're kind of ahead of the curves, so to speak. Are we in the middle of the curve? Are we kind of ahead of the curve in terms of other cities throughout Missouri?
I think we're a little bit beyond the middle of the curve. There's a couple other communities in the Kansas City area that I'm familiar with that have adopted the ordinance, very similar. But I think that those would be the larger communities that either already have the facilities or quickly will get the facilities. Mm-hmm. Being the size of community that we're at, I think we're ahead of the curve.
Okay. Well, I was curious. I know there's been a lot of controversy. Has there been any? Do you guys talk about legislation, lawsuits, and things that have resulted from installation of these, or the potential provisions that cities are having to adopt? With the FCC and some of the statutory stuff that they've come up with for these installation of these towers. Do you guys discuss that at all in terms of potential problems down the road, or legislation, lawsuits, et cetera? Did that come into play at all?
I mean, it hasn't. We've monitored what's happened across, through other jurisdictions. When I was drafting all of this, doing all the research, but it hasn't been something with this technology that we've seen. So. Okay.
Mr. Zerk?
Go ahead, Mr. Zerk.
I would only note on that one that there is good language in here. In fact, I've made in my notes to the edges the items that make legal happy, at least with regard to this particular proposal, and there is provisions that provide for indemnification of the city for any damages that might be caused by the neglectful or inappropriate installation of these facilities. So we do have some protection under the terms of our proposed ordinance.
Okay. Thank you.
At this time, I'd like to invite anyone from the public that wishes to speak on Case 20012, the 32nd Amendment to the Unified Development Code, small wireless facilities, to please come forward to the podium. And seeing none, I'll close the public hearing, and the floor is open for further discussion by the commission.
I'll go ahead and make a motion.
All right.
I'll make a motion to accept the staff proposed findings of fact and forward case number 20012, the 32nd Amendment to the UDC, to the City Council with a recommendation for approval.
I'll second.
All right. So that was a motion by Commissioner Urquilla and a second by Commissioner Peterman to accept staff proposed findings of fact and forward case 20012, 32nd Amendment to the UDC, to City Council with a recommendation of approval. And in discussion on that motion, I believe that there may be at least two code references in this proposed ordinance that are not correct with code and need a bit of further discussion. So, Mr. Zur, can we do that with the motion on the floor, or what's your advice?
You have a motion on the floor at this particular time. If there is a proposal to amend that motion, it can be made depending upon what the commission as a whole would like to do. It's been presented to the commission as a whole, so any member of the commission can propose an amendment to that proposed motion that would need to be seconded and then voted upon.
Well, in that case, I would move to amend the motion to include a correction on, pardon me a minute, I'll get this straight. To include a correction, this is actually on the bottom of page 10, and what is shown as item E, and I think that's actually proposed into code as 420.040 C8D1E, and it's currently making a reference to section 420.030 C8D1C. I don't believe that's correct. I think that should say 420.040 C8D1C. And also at the bottom of page 12, what's shown as 3A, partway down, makes mention again of 420.030 C8D3B2, and I believe that should be 420.040 C8D3B2. So I would move to amend the motion on the floor to add those corrections before this goes to City Council.
Second to amend.
Oh, I'll second it.
Thank you.
Pardon, was that Commissioner Urquilla?
I'm seconding your amendment.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
All right. And is there any discussion, and to include comments from staff? Is there any discussion on that proposed amendment to the motion? Yeah, Mayor Turnbow.
I would only ask that, is there no way for the staff at this point to verify that that's the case?
It is.
Or are you?
Those corrections
Corrections are correct.
do need to be made, so
Okay.
good catch, thank you.
Great, and good question, Mayor Turnbow, thank you. All right, is there any further discussion on the amendment to the motion?
Good.
So we're taking a vote only on the amendment to the motion. All those in favor, raise a hand, please.
Good.
9. And we have 9 in favor, none opposed, no abstentions. And that takes us back to the motion by Commissioner Akia, second by Commissioner Peterman, as amended,
Perfect.
which I believe would now be to accept staff proposed findings of fact and forward case 20012, 32nd Amendment to the UDC to City Council with a recommendation of approval and noted conditions, or noted corrections. Any further discussion on that motion? Yeah. All right, all those in favor, raise a hand, please. And we have 9 in favor, none opposed, no abstentions. Thank you very much. And I believe that will take us into City Council report. Mr. Zur, we're glad to see you this evening.
Thank you, Chairman. It's a pleasure to be able to join you this evening. The last time I was here, I don't know what City Council report, whether or not there was one provided at the last go-around for the August 18th, so I can skip that one. Fantastic. With that being said, there's been one City Council meeting since the last Planning and Zoning Commission meeting. A couple of items of import for you all to consider. First and foremost, establishment of a stop sign for you who might be driving around town. That establishment of the stop sign has been approved unanimously, located at North Fox Ridge Drive and 163rd Street. If you've got questions, I'm sure Mr. Crass would be happy to provide you with the engineering reasons for that. The next item on the agenda for consideration, again, it was under second readings, was the Dean Avenue Extension right-of-way final plat, which was unanimously approved by the City Council. You all had the opportunity to evaluate this on the August 4th, 2020 meeting date, approving it by a vote of 7-0 to 1. This, of course, is the extension that you'd have from Dean Avenue Extension and the final plat that was associated with that, constructed south of North Cass Parkway. The only other items that I would note for you were under first readings. The item is the replat of the Prairie View of the Good Ranch. This was motioned and seconded and approved unanimously by the City Council for Good Otis LLC, and requested a replat of the Prairie View of the Good Ranch subdivision in order to modify an easement. You might recall this from your August 18th meeting, which was approved by a unanimous vote of 7-0. Again, modifying the easement that runs across the middle of the subdivision, as I recall, changing it from 50 foot to 60 some odd feet. Thank you, 66 feet. That would be all that I have for your staff or for your City Council report this evening. I'm happy to answer any additional questions, and obviously Mr. Catterat, Mr. Crass, and Mayor Turnbow would all also be able to provide any input.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Mr. Zur. Any additional input on City Council? All right. Mr. Catterat, Ms. Jardot, we'd like to hear the staff report, please.
Yes, sir, a couple of items. Looking at our schedule, we will have a meeting on September 15th. We have 2 cases. One will be a public hearing for rezoning. It's about 155 acres. This property is on the west side of North Madison Street, north of Madison Creek. It's south of the Creekmore subdivision. The request rezoning it from its current agricultural to our R1P zoning designation. And then the second item will be a site plan review for Scooter's Coffee. They're hoping to locate the north side of 58 Highway between the Belfonte's Car Wash and Foxwood Springs. It actually would be right adjacent to the Foxwood Springs property area. They'll be creating a lot. It'll be at the end of that private drive that currently dead ends into the field area there. Then on October 6th, we'll have planning commission meeting, another public hearing. This will be for a rezoning of about 55 acres. It was previously part of the Brookside subdivision, referred to as Brookside South. So it's land on the north side of Hubock Hill Road to the east of Stonegate. This would be a request to rezone the 55 acres from its current R1P to a R2P zoning designation. So those are the current items we have scheduled for public hearings. There's also on September 15th of note is a Board of Adjustment meeting at 6 o'clock for a variance request for a lot in the Edgewater at Creekmore subdivision. Those are the current cases we have under review.
I have a quick question for you on, it's not really numbered, but it's page 5 under departmental activities. And this would be the 6th bullet, I believe, says developer of the proposed Parkside subdivision to be located on the east side of North Madison Street. Should be west, correct?
Oh, that is correct.
Okay, not a biggie, but thank you. Yeah, Commissioner Wiggins.
Well, staying on that one, I mean, since we just talked about two things up, that it's coming back up on the 15th, that says that has been placed on hold to review. Its public hearing was scheduled for the 18th and has been canceled, but really it has been rescheduled. That's probably just a formality just for looking at that, or is that supposed to be like past tense?
But keep in mind, this is a July monthly report. It's not the August monthly report. I'm sorry,
Okay.
it's the
Right.
July monthly report. It's not the August. So at the time that was,
Accurate.
this was, I haven't changed it because
Understood.
Well,
today
No,
I
that
wasn't
makes-
able to get the report for August out. So
That makes sense.
and Commissioner Wiggins, if I remember correctly, the previous notation was actually for a preliminary plat, which I think got put on hold, and now this is a rezoning request. So they're clearly related to the same subdivision, but I think they're actually two separate actions. And the original preliminary plat is not yet coming toward us.
the initial rezoning request was for a PUD zoning, which requires preliminary plat to come along with
Oh.
the zoning.
Okay,
They've now changed from PUD to the R1P and dropped the preliminary plat as part of this zoning matter. They will follow up with that, of course, as, depending upon what happens with the zoning.
okay.
So sorry, my question, the intent that I was going to have was you mentioned was it Brookside or Brook? What was the?
It was Brookside South. It's referred to as Saddlebrook now.
Okay, and I just didn't catch it. What is the date that we should anticipate that, since this ends at September? Is that going to be in our October meetings?
It will be. That'll be your October 6th
October 6th.
meeting. Yes.
Thank you so much.
Other questions? Commissioner Bowie?
Quick question on your building permit activity, back on page 1. I was just curious, the total commercial, I like to gaze at the numbers sometimes. So the total commercial permit valuation, what was that 39, what was that about?
What the bulk of that is made up by the Lofts apartment development. It's actually commercial building permits because it's an apartment building.
Gotcha.
Throws the number off.
Okay. Thanks.
So I think we're still in staff report, and Mr. Carteret, thank you for that. Mr. Krass, would you have anything to add?
I do. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The Westgate Drive was open to traffic last week. That is the final project from the 2016 bond projects that were approved by voters. Mr. Icky didn't talk about the upcoming GeoBond projects, but I will. My staff is currently working with the Parks Department on the Centerview Phase 2 improvements, as well as the City Hall Plaza. Ward Road design proposals are due this week. We have a very lofty goal of having that project under construction by early summer of 2021. And Mr. Zur mentioned the stop sign at Fox Ridge Drive and 163rd Street. We anticipate that being installed this week. We're waiting for utility locates there, make sure there aren't any conflicts at the sign locations. And that concludes my staff report.
Yeah. Thank you, Mr. Kress. We move along to public comment. If anyone from the public would like to speak to the commission this evening, please come forward. And seeing none, we'll move ahead to commission member comment. Commissioner Wiggins.
Thank you as always. Obviously, Mr. Iki's already gone, but thank you for the presentation tonight from the staff. Thank you.
Yep. Commissioner Mansur.
I'd like to start by thanking all of the Capital Improvement Committee. That was a great CIP presentation. I'd also like to apologize. I will not be able to attend the September 15th meeting. I do look forward to seeing what the public and the commission have to say regarding that rezoning. And as usual, thank you, staff.
Commissioner Peterman.
No comments tonight.
Commissioner Bowie.
No comment. Appreciate you guys' hard work. Thank you.
And I apologize, I usually seem to forget Secretary Peterman, but at any rate, it's still no comment, right? Vice Chair Pfizer.
Well, I'd like to thank you, our chairman, for having such a eagle eye on reviewing our documents. You kind of find things that, honestly, you could read it 20 times and not see. So I'm always kind of in awe of what you find in there. So thanks for keeping us on our toes. I'd also like to say I went to the TB Hanna Station Park the other day and checked out the playground, and it is amazing. If you haven't been there, definitely go there. It's all inclusive, and it's really just amazing to see how that worked, because I really didn't know what it would be like. And it's a lot of fun. There's a zip line, there's swings that are good enough for big people to get onto. So if you haven't been there, I think you should visit it. It's definitely something that our city should be very proud of. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Ackland.
I pretty much want to say thank you as well to the staff, and also I enjoyed a lot. I got a lot out of that presentation, so I appreciate that as well. And also to the commissioners, just listening to the input and the questions, I get a lot out of that, so I appreciate that.
Commissioner Urquia.
Yeah, I just want to start off by thanking Katie again for the last meeting and handling that all by herself. Just want to make sure that's in the notes, that she did an excellent job. And then I also want to thank Mr. Akey for his presentation tonight. I have also had the chance to visit the new park at TB Hanna Station, and my one comment would be I didn't realize all-inclusive meant that the parent gets more of a workout than the children. Yeah, just wanted to throw that out there.
Thank you. Mayor Turnbow.
Yeah, you know how when you watch a movie for the first time and you come back around and watch it a second time and you get more out of it? Well, I actually did get more out of it the second time from Mr. Icky, so it was a good presentation tonight by Mike. I'm really proud of the staff and thanked him for that again. As you know, Mr. Fearborn gave it to the council in work session a couple of weeks ago, so that was my second time through for the CIP. But anyway, good job tonight, and that's all I have.
Thank you. I want to thank staff. As the commission noted already, we have considerably more staff here this evening, and we appreciate your support as always. Unless any of the commissioners or the mayor has any further comments, I would entertain a motion to adjourn this evening's meeting.
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
Second.
Motion by Commissioner Peterman, second by Commissioner Wiggins to adjourn this evening's meeting. All those in favor, raise a hand, please. 4, 5, 6. And we have 9 in favor, none opposed, no abstentions. Thank you all very much.
By the way, man, 40 hours have about a 10-mile max range. What
4G.
You couldn't have